Hey guys, good evening. Welcome to class. How's everyone doing tonight? Hopefully you're doing good and having a good start. Happy Thursday to you. And it's already a little bit of a noisy background over here tonight, so we'll get through it. So a couple of things, guys. Before we start, the week definitely flew by for sure. Is just a couple of quick announcements. November 11th is actually the cutoff date for Rio's classes. In case students are wanted to drop the class for incomplete, or if you're feeling like you're really behind and pretty much want to make sure that it does not get part of your grade. November 11th would be the final day to cut off with a withdrawal, and it will not impact your grade point average. So if you're a little concerned, or your score or your grade in the class is just really low and you're not sure if you're going to catch up in the next 4 weeks, plus the 2 additional projects that we're starting on in the next month, think about it, okay? Because the 11th would technically be that final day before we go into like the point of no return, I guess you can say, because then it could impact grade, GPAs, things like that, okay? So that's going to be the cutoff date. Mostly pretty much everyone in the class is getting a C average or higher, with the exception of about 4 or 5 people. So if the intent is to drop, make sure that you drop that class. Technically, Rio students have to do the drop on their own to do it, okay? So just be on the lookout. If you're seriously considering it, then definitely go online or talk to your counselor to assist with you in that process, or any counselor at Rio that's available via appointment or in person if you're on campus, and they will guide you through that process, okay? So just wanted to throw that out there before anything, because everyone knows their situation. So take that, just take it into consideration if you're thinking about that, okay? No judgment if you decide to drop. Life happens, things happen. You know, it's things always happen every semester, just period. And so that's my goal ultimately, is to try to get, 80% and high passing rate across across my classes. And that's a pretty good number within the last 2 years with all the interventions that were put into place. So emails, how to catch up, one-on-one conversations, opportunities to catch up, extra credit, things like that. Those would be opportunities for you, okay? So just wanted to get that out there and make that official for you. The second announcement that I'll be making is that we're pretty much, for t-shirt designs, a little bit over half the class, or almost half the class, has already uploaded their files to Canvas. So if that's you, great. We're going to talk about that next project tonight. And then there's still the other half of the class that still needs to upload/finish their files, to which you'll have an opportunity tonight to do that too, okay? So I'm going to start the first half of class talking about the new project. And then basically, once we talk about that new project, there's a series of things that everyone has to do, for that time frame. While you're working on the new projects, for those folks that are moving forward, the other half of the class is finishing up their t-shirt designs. And I'm basically going to take time to talk to you if we didn't talk on Tuesday, and if you didn't see the recording on Tuesday, from this Tuesday, then I basically went one-on-one for all the designs. And reviewed all the projects as best as I can, with the exception of like 1 or 2 people. So that's where we're at, okay? So we're moving forward. If we haven't seen any designs, then we need to get them in right away, and basically hustle for the catch-up, okay? So I'll try my best, but have something available, because if that t-shirt is not even 50% of the way done, then you definitely got to hustle, because we're going to move even faster for the next 2 projects, okay? So just wanted to make that clear for the class, and then if you have any questions, you can direct message me, and then we can kind of go from there with our one-on-ones this evening, okay? All right, if that makes sense, you can give me a thumbs up emoji, and then we can proceed from there. Okay. All right, very cool. So tonight, guys, let's talk about that new project. So the first thing we're gonna do is just talk about what this project is. This is the Minimalist project that is kind of like the t-shirt project in some ways. The techniques are a lot, very, very much the same. But this takes it a step further where you create the artwork and you tell the story of your choice, okay? And so that's kind of the sense about it. So what's basically going to happen is that you're going to make a movie poster, or what they call a minimalist movie poster, or a movie poster that's all about style and substance, or substance is style, or style is substance. And you're basically going to try to interpret the story with pictures, okay? So how do I tell a story if I don't have any famous people in it? How do I tell a story of a film if there is really like first stars, you know, like just people that are unknown, but it's just a really, really good film, a really interesting film, it's a provocative film. But that's the idea, right? So what would that look like for a film? And so minimalism or style of substance is a really great way to do that. And I would say it's not taught often because it's one of those things where it goes pretty deep into the theory of graphic design, which is exactly what I want first year students to kind of grasp sooner than later, okay? And you'll notice on the lower left that it does refer to Saul Bass's work. And if you don't know the name, then you will tonight, because we're gonna actually watch a short film about him and the work that he's done, and see how that kind of translates into this project. So if you're a fan, then awesome. But if not, this is a graphic design powerhouse designer. And he did a lot of really key films with their movie titles and movie credits. So he's kind of like the creator of the movie credit or the movie sequence at the beginning of a movie. And you'll see what I mean in just a few moments, okay? So we'll take a look at that in just a few. I always like to kind of kick off this project with a quote from an unlikely figure, which is Steve Jobs, founder of Apple Computer. I always think about where students kind of connect with the idea of minimalism, right? And I always try to find something that kind of relates to society and kind of make it seem like it's relevant. And I would say that you know, Apple iPhones, that whole feeling and look and vibe of the company is pretty much like a good way of like connecting minimalism, right? Some would call it contemporary design, but basically a lot of like what you see with Apple and companies similar to Apple is that they really do have something about minimalism that is really appealing to globally to most people, but very interesting to Americans. And he would say things like, you know, make something wonderful and put it out there, right? Or you know, the world is a very noisy place, right? And so we really want to send clear messages to the public, or how do you build a brand that kind of communicates simplicity? So I would say Apple is pretty much a good example of design, of minimalism, of style as substance, that is that when you look at something, you kind of feel the quality graphically, with a phone or with a computer physically, right? So there's just something that design does that kind of transfers from one person to another on the quality side of style being substance. And this would be like a really good way to kind of segue into it. I forget if I have the graphic here. Oh, do I have it here? It's probably in my other deck. Gosh, I thought I had it. But it's probably for it's for my logos. Actually it is here. You know, they say for Apple Computer, when you first start, they show this image by Pablo Picasso that kind of talks a little bit about what Apple does or what companies that do minimalism do. And if you notice, it starts on the left with like a detailed drawing of this bull, and then it slowly evolves to a simple line that is a representation of a bull, right? So the line, the quality of the line art looks like that bull, but it's still like a variation of it. So this is like a really nice example of how stripping away to the bare essentials can still say the bull. Does that make sense? So, and when you're starting out in graphic design, I always like to tell like first year students, it's like your job is to really kind of like filter all the noise and try to get to the most clearest, purest message graphically for a viewer to understand. And if you can pretend that this person is a 5-year-old, or if you're designing for 5-year-olds, where it's so easy that a 5-year-old can understand it, then you've hit gold in the graphic design world. Okay, does that make sense? And so simplicity is key, but that's because that we're super like bombarded with marketing and noise and graphics and bad design and just misinformation and all this stuff, right? We are so distracted that it's almost impossible to get a message across graphically to anyone unless it is of substance and it has a level of authenticity to it. And Picasso was probably one of the first to kind of put that out there and say like a line is not just a line that is drawn stylistically can represent something as complex as an animal, as a bull. Okay, so it takes a lot of effort to bring something down to its basic parts and choose which of the most basic parts you want to bring into it, and that's what this project does. So you would normally see this on an advanced level class, but I roll it out in first year just to kind of like put you guys in an uncomfortable space so that you can kind of figure things out and kind of work through the process and make decisions that are vital and important. Does that make sense? So that's kind of the idea behind the project. That's the big picture, the big goal, the driving question is like, how do I get you guys to think simply, graphically, but also telling the most important essential parts of the story, okay? Which is, in this case, gonna be some films, okay? So we're gonna take a look at Saul Bass's work. I'm gonna show you a video about some of his designs. And if you've seen them, you probably recognize them. But it's a really nice 7-minute video that kind of goes a little bit into the work, what style as substance means. And then we'll kind of continue and evolve that idea in this project, okay? And he's best known for simple geometric shapes and their symbolism, okay? Where it's often a focal point, a single image, a dominant image that really delivers a super powerful message. So what Saul's greatest contribution was like, he was able to get down to the most simplest graphic in its most powerful symbolic representation, with the line, with the shape, with the color, with the form, with the value. He really used those art elements to communicate the meaning of a movie. And that takes a lot of energy, a lot of critical thinking to get to that point, okay? So I'm gonna flip it over to the video so we can kind of watch a few minutes of this as sort of a introductory / discussion question, okay? I'm gonna try to open up the YouTube video on a bigger tab, and hopefully your internet is going good. If it gets a little choppy, then go ahead and you can mute me in the video and you can go directly to the post on Canvas to watch it. But I'm just gonna play it for a few minutes so we can have a little bit of a time to connect, okay? So let's hope that, let's hope it actually does play tonight. And we will get that set up. We had a little bit of sound. And here we go.
So if you've ever spent any time hanging around film blogs, then you've probably come across the phrase, style is substance. I don't have any idea who coined it, but whenever I hear it, I often think of one filmmaker, Saul Bass. You may not know his name, but you'd no doubt recognize his iconic work. For over 50 years, he worked as a graphic designer on ad campaigns and eventually became an on-set visual consultant, and had the pleasure of working with names like Hitchcock, Scorsese, Kubrick, and Preminger. Or maybe they had the pleasure of working with him. Bass arrived in a mid-1950s Hollywood that was going through incredible change, and his work, particularly his modernist-leaning title sequences, helped spur that change forward. Despite the fact that true title sequences aren't really something that most movies carry today, the ones that do feature them are almost always in debt to Bass's style and philosophy, and it's that philosophy that I want to take a minute to explore.
I have felt for some time that the audience involvement with a film should really begin with the very first frame. You have to remember that until then, titles had tended to be lists of dull credits, mostly ignored or used for popcorn time. So there seemed to be a real opportunity to use titles in a new way, to actually create a climate for the story that was about to unfold. You'll remember that the film was about drug addiction, and the symbol, that is the arm, in its jagged form, expressed the jarring, disjointed existence of the drug addict. Now, to the extent that it was an accurate and telling synthesis of the film and the ad campaign, these same qualities came with it into the theater. And of course, with the addition of motion and sound, really came alive and set up the mood and the texture of the film.
What's important isn't just that his sequences are creative and visually interesting, it's that, if you think about it, what you're seeing is actually a short version of the film you're about to watch, almost always broken down to one or two simple visualized ideas. So a wild romp about a Vegas heist is boiled down to this. A turn-of-the-century high society romance like this. Or a courtroom drama backed by a jazz soundtrack like this. But that distinct abstract style of his isn't just limited to summarizing plot. Where his sequences often succeed the most are in symbolizing pure emotions. So okay, take away the music track. How can you prep the audience for a tragedy in a purely visual way? Well, Bass would answer with something like this. And if you asked him to portray terror, he'd give you this. Again, take away the music. That idea is still completely there. Now, if there's a lesson in Bass's style, then that lesson, very simply, is that you can do this with anything. You can think outside of and way past whatever box there is. There are no rules. You can use stock footage and sound bites. If you've got a couple cats hanging around, grab a camera and substitute them in for the main characters. Or you can just rip the screen apart. And if you're ever grasping for an idea, try two things. The first, play with primary colors, especially red. Like every great filmmaker, Bass was fairly obsessed with it. Just see for yourself. As for the other thing, well, everybody sure loves animation.
It's a mad, mad, mad.
But that leads us to a much more foundational point. And although it's not a magical or life-changing rule of thumb, it's still a vital one. Do less for more. On the simpler side, that translates to the fact that just because you can use anything doesn't mean that you should use everything. Certain sequences can remain simplistic and be completely effective. On the more complex side, you'll see that this is a rule that isn't at all limited to title sequences. You may have heard this before, that Rumors abound about who actually directed the famous shower scene in Psycho, either Alfred Hitchcock or Saul Bass, who was credited as a pictorial consultant. Regardless of whoever did the deed, Bass's fingerprints are all over the sequence. The combination of extreme close-ups, the fast, tight editing, the sound, they all lead you to believe that you're seeing something that you're actually not. I'm sure you've seen this before, but take this down to a frame-by-frame level. You're not actually seeing much of anything. Besides 4 individual frames, you never once see the knife actually strike Marion. You don't see the actual murder, but you think you do. You feel it because of the way the images and the sound are all put together. And the reason that works, the reason people still talk about that scene today, is because of that principle. That principle which was at the core of Saul Bass's work, of saying so much with so little, of turning substance into style. Because as we all know, style is substance.
My work on titles was a marvelous opportunity to learn about filmmaking. I think I touched about every aspect of the process, both creative and technical. And I worked with many wonderful people. But there are always new challenges, new mountains to climb. I've since directed interior sequences for other people's features, short films, commercials, my own feature. But it's all film. Film is wonderful. I'm a filmmaker, and I intend to continue making films of all kinds, short or long, because there's nothing I'd rather do.
Okay. So, I don't know if you've seen this before, but I think this was a nice roundabout. So let's go ahead. All right, so hopefully you like that, and we'll kind of take a moment to talk about it via the chat here. But I kind of wanted to get your input on that. In fact, let's go ahead and try this for the topic of discussion. So just out of curiosity, like what is style, or what is this idea of style? Is substance, okay? Even though that is the, even though that's going to be the subject, right? Type it in the chat and maybe share with a few words with the class, like, you know, what is style as substance, in your opinion? Like, what does it mean to make graphics as symbols in design? When I refer to style, it's really referring to, is that the look, the way it looks says something, and how it looks, right? The art elements, the line, the shape, the colors, they represent something, okay? So what does that mean to you? What's your first reaction, your first thoughts? Go ahead and take a moment to type it in the chat, and then we go from there, okay? All right, I'll give you guys about 2 minutes to set that up. And that's basically going to be the question for this evening, okay? Oh, check it out. Thank you, Alexis. Very cool. Okay, good example. Good example. Okay, so hopefully we got some replies here. Let me go ahead and just pull that up for just a quick second. Okay, did we make a reply here, guys? Or are we still typing? Just wanted to make sure. Let me go ahead and double check my writing over here. Oh, okay, great. Sorry, maybe time is going fast on my phone. Okay, thanks guys, appreciate it. They need to do on Zoom like the little 3 dots that your cell phone has that says that it's still typing. That'll be a nice little indicator. All right, guys, so give you guys a couple more minutes on the write-ups. So I'm starting to read them a little bit. You can even see the replies too. I'll give you guys about another minute or two on the writing, okay? And again, this is first impression. So if it's a little unclear, that's okay to say. We're just starting, so we just want to engage on the concept. Okay. Okay, guys. So if you're still typing, keep going. I really do like the comments. If you take a look at it, a couple folks uploaded some images too, so I can tell it's resonating, and it's definitely some nice pieces that we see there. But yeah, so it's, I think a couple things that I started noticing here was, like Andrew had mentioned, if you look at the Sopranos logo, because let's take a look here. Like the Sopranos logo is like an example of simplicity, telling a message in one graphic, right? So the R is replaced by the pistol, and that says a lot about the story and what you're going to say. So that's a good example here on the right hand side of what you're potentially going to get into, right? And this would definitely be a good segue when we get into logo design, because at the end of the day, this project is supposed to help you start thinking about less is more, so that when we do the logo, you're already thinking that, and you're already in that mindset, okay? And so, and really to say less with more requires you to start talking in the language of symbols. So that's a great example. So thanks for mentioning that. So that's a good one there. I also like Dominic's reply here with Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. This is essentially an example of minimalism, right? And so I like that piece too. And basically it's saying a lot with little, right? So two central images, you got a magnifying glass, you have small characters, but even those little characters are customized to reflect the film to some degree, right? So rather than the traditional film of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and if you don't know which I'm referring to, that's an old film from 1997. Oh my goodness. So some of you guys were born that year. So I'll show you the poster. But let's see, this would probably be this on the right-hand side, right? So very different, right? 4 kids, person shrunk, using pictures, right? But I'm also telling the same story, right? This would probably be a pretty decent example of, a movie poster that's using photographs to represent those symbols, but it's still, speaking symbolically within the language. And when you look at this image, then this is another way of saying it graphically if I didn't have photos. So this is a good example if somebody came to me and said, hey, Almina, you know what? We don't have photos. We don't have anyone in the film. There's nothing we can do. We need a poster. We have no footage, no money for any film or any photographs. What can you do, right? This would be a good example of that, right? Because it's communicating a message, it's curious, and the style is basically referring to the story, right? So it's simple, but it's also trying to say something to me directly. So in effect, that style of simplicity has some weight, some meaning to it, which is a fancy word for substance. Does that make sense? So colors, shapes, sizes, forms, right? That's really what style of substance means. And for me, right, is that it's referring to the lines, the shape, the colors, the feel, everything that's going on graphically, the elements of art, the elements of design, right, that we've mastered in our t-shirts, right, echoing the art style, as we said. Now the style becomes the message, right? And the style, all that art element happening in the design actually has a meaning behind it, which has substance. Does that make sense? And so that's really at the heart of the project. And Saul Bass was able to do it with multiple pictures in film. We're trying to say it with one poster, the film, okay? So that's the idea. I really like what Alexis did over here with the Grand Theft Auto, saying like, well, here's a sequence of stories, and it's like very comic book style, right? Where I'm showing multiple images. So that's a different range or a different way of doing it, in where you're telling multiple things in the story, right? But what if I took this and brought it down to one central image or 2 graphics combined, right? Like bringing it down even further, right? That's it. That's the level we're going to take it. Okay. So that's, these are really good examples. These are really good terminologies, and thank you for your honesty. If it doesn't make sense, we're going to look at those pictures right now and we're going to take some sense out of that. Okay. So that's at the heart of what the project is. So let's kind of jump in so we can kind of get to some t-shirt folks for tonight. But I wanted to kind of flash back and look at this, right? So Bass is definitely the example of that. And he basically created title sequences in films to tell certain stories, okay? But if you were to, take away the music, mute the music, or freeze it at a certain frame, then you could tell certain things about the movie just by the shapes and the forms and colors, right? So if I'm using jagged edges or rough lines, and I'm saying that there's an awkwardness and there's a disjunction, as he says, about the character in the movie. So those rough lines, those jagged lines, are basically saying that there's something wrong, something's off about the character and about the film. And if I put a character in like the zigzag pattern, it means that they're falling into this abyss. So I'm saying something about the character, like falling, being basically going down this hole that they can't get themselves out of. So it's a symbol of the film, right? And we've seen it evolve from different stages, right? So we see, all these films and posters from like the 60s, 70s, right? And if you flash forward to more closer to like the 2000s and the 90s and even today, that language still carries weight, okay? So Precious is a film from 2000s. I think it was like early 2010s, late 2000s. Clockers is a Spike Lee film that's from the 90s, right? And you can even see examples from today of those films being interpreted using this style as substance method, okay? Minimalist posters, stylist substance posters, they're one and the same, okay? And there's a lot of really nice examples that Bass gives us that you may have seen at one point or another, like the West Side Story logo or poster on the lower right here. It's about dance. It's about New York from the staircase right there, like the fire escape that you see normally in New York, and these two male and female figures that are sort of separated but pushed apart, as it were, right? So each image has its own symbols and meanings behind it, and they're really good examples of how to say more with less. So if you want to get a good history of graphic design, or you want to get schooled in graphic design methods, definitely look at Bass, because even his posters were really good. And he was able to turn those posters into film sequences that we see today, right? So those are some ideas there. But I want to have a little bit of fun with you guys and kind of throw some films or TV show minimalist posters your way. And I'd like you to take a guess of what these films are, okay? Or shows. This is a movie, okay? Anyone want to take a guess or type in what that film is? And yes, Connor for the win. Yeah, this is Black Swan, right? So you wouldn't know it unless you saw the film, but the ballerina and the swan in the color of black gave it away, right? So that's one example, right, of Black Swan. Okay, the font also is matching the style as well of the artwork. So taking it back a little bit to the t-shirt design. This is a TV show. Anyone want to take a guess of what this TV show is called? Or if you've seen it on those? Yeah, Kaiser for the win. Yeah, this is 2.5 Men, right? So literally showing you what you see is what you get, right? So you're saying 2.5 Men, you're saying the title of the film, right? So this method of kind of like getting you to say it in your head will get you curious, make you say it in your head, and all of a sudden I've just successfully advertised to you. Does that make sense? So so that goes back to what I was saying even about Paul Rand, who said like the level of abstraction that kind of looks like two things sort of idea is going to make me want to look at it even more. And because of that, I'm now thinking about it more, and now I'm locked in, and now I'm successfully getting you to connect to the story, to the movie, to the product, to the idea, right? So this is design kind of definitely engaging the viewer. Here's another film, okay, that's out there. Yeah, the placement of the hearts and the relevance, for sure. Let's see who can guess this film. Okay, yeah, Connor for the win. Yeah, so this film, this is Forrest Gump, right? And these are some, remembered pieces or items in the film. Suit. These are kind of like those important moments in the film, I guess you can say, right? So you could create kind of like a sequence, right? Or you could say 2 or less. But if the film is called Forrest Gump, it would be, well, there's some creative ways to do it today, right? Whether it's like the bubblegum hat by itself. This person used a series of icons within the film, assuming that they never saw the film before. So that was an interesting run there. This one's a little bit more challenging. Kind of relates to Halloween, so I'll throw that out there for timing. But this is really more of a old film there. That's a good guess, Laker, but not quite. So it's a little bit older than that as well. It's a retro film. That's it. Yeah, Kaiser for the win. Yeah, that's Predator. Okay. So that's that little symbol that the Predator character uses to attack. It's like that famous sort of like homing beacon or targeting beam that you see in the film. So that's an iconic symbol as well. And so even if you look at this poster from Snow White, what do you see first? Do you see the apple core, or do you see the male and the female face in the negative space? Right? You can almost see the outline there. So do you see the apple with the heart in the center, or in the black, do you see the face, the outline of the of Snow White and Prince Charming, right? So that's 2 in 1, right? You could start off seeing the 1, and then if you look longer, you see the 2, right? And can you see like the side profile of the face and the nose and the mouth, sort of like a black silhouette? I'm not sure if you do see it, but this is kind of like the profile right here in black. Kind of looks like a face. Here's the mouth, and then there's like the chin right there in red, and then on the opposite side you see that, right? So that uses negative space, and Prince is on the right, yes. And so that uses negative space to communicate a message. And so that's another technique that even carries over for logos as well. In fact, that's probably, for me, my little secret weapon when it comes to logos, is that if I use a lot of negative space as well when it comes to design. So you can too. And so you can even use it for the poster. So what are we gonna do? What's this project about at the end of the day? Well, what you're gonna do is that on your own this evening, you're going to watch 3 different short films, okay? One is called 97%. The second one is called Soar, and the third is a documentary called Chicano. So 97%, let me just kind of briefly mention, 97% is a comedy, a comedy with no dialogue, basically. The Soar is a 3D animated film, and Chicano is a documentary about Japanese teenagers that are in love with the Cholo Mexican American culture, to the point that they dress and live lifestyles in Japan of the Cholo lifestyle, or as they call it, Chicano lifestyle. Okay, so and it's subtitled, but they're Japanese. Okay, so there's 3 films that you guys get to watch. Okay, and we're essentially going to think visually about the film, not verbally, after we're done watching it. Okay, so we're gonna kind of take a brief moment to watch it. So I'm actually gonna pause and give you guys about 20 to 30 minutes to watch these films, and I'm gonna direct you to Canvas so that you can watch them on your own. I would normally, if we were in class, I would play them. But if I were to upload this video to YouTube, I might get a copyright infringement of some sort for replaying it. So I'm gonna kind of save myself the trouble a little bit, and I'm gonna switch over to Chrome so that you can watch it at home on your computer or on your device, and then you can probably get the maximum effect for that, okay? So that is going to be located in tonight's assignment. GDSN 164. Let's go down to student view. And if you go to the minimalist poster assignment for this evening, which is way at the bottom. Okay, activate student view. Let's go student view. Okay, it should be turning pink in just a couple of seconds. There we go. And okay, you'll see it for the latest unit here. So week 13 and 14, minimalist poster design. We go to assignment there. Click onto minimalist poster project under assignment. On those, yeah, that definitely can happen for copyright. So streams always tend to get stopped. But you'll notice that here is the minimalist poster here, okay? So you're good. And then right after that, there are 3 embedded videos, okay? So one is the 97%. So this is a Vimeo embed. You can click on it, push play, or you can push play and then hit the enlarge, the enlarger here, or the maximum, it maximizes it. I forget the name of it, I'm drawing it. If you push play and hit maximize, it'll go big on your screen, because you'll definitely want to capture all the details in the films, okay? One of the first things I would recommend as you're watching is to be open and try to be aware of the graphics and the most like funny and memorable, heartfelt, emotional moments, or the cool moments of the film, okay? And so I got 3 of them there. They're all the same. So blue on the left and larger on the right, the little diagonal line there. And you're gonna watch it. So we have 8 minutes, 7 minutes, 7 minutes and 30 seconds or so. It's like 14, 21, almost like 25 minutes, okay? So I'll give you guys about 25, let's give you 30 minutes, and you can throw in a little break after you watch it, a 5-minute break. So we'll connect again for about 8:15, if that works for everyone. 8:15, we'll reconnect, and then we're gonna talk a little bit about what you saw in the films and how do we interpret it, okay? So that's gonna be for the folks that are moving forward with the project. So go ahead and watch that, and then for the rest of the time, I'm gonna talk to our t-shirt design folks that need to kind of discuss their designs or any questions. And so for that, I'm going to create a breakout room so that we can talk. And if you see that, then you can jump into the breakout room under my name, Professor Almena, and then we'll talk there while the rest of the class is working on their shirt designs, okay? So if you need to speak with me, meet me over in the room, and then we'll reconnect with the class for the t-shirt designs at about 8:15, 8:20-ish, around that time, okay? All right, guys, enjoy the films, and when we get back, we'll talk about a little bit about each one and how do we develop this project into the next step, okay? All right, I'm gonna pause the video and we will start our one-on-ones with our t-shirt folks, and we will see you in about 25, 30 minutes. All right, we'll see you then. Okay, guys, so we're back. Hopefully you enjoyed the films. So let's talk a little bit about it, just for the sake of the recording. And we will first start off with the film 97%, okay? So pretty funny. I wanted to throw a little bit of humor because there's nothing that really, no one says anything. It's just purely visual, and it connects with a mobile phone. But just out of curiosity, what are some things that you guys remember about the film? So what are some things that you remember about the film? You can voice it in, or you can type it in, but let me know what it is there too. Okay, so so you can voice it in, or you can type it in, whatever you feel comfortable with on there.
I think the first thing I noticed was that when he was going down the escalator to the subway, he was staring at the couple, like kissing each other, holding each other, and that kind of set the tone of, he's alone and he's looking for something.
Okay, so alone and looking for something. Okay, so that's good. Philip said it was a little bit on the sad side too, right? So those are some things that you kind of notice in the film, right? Okay. When it comes to the environment, what were some things that you noticed in the environment? Like where does it take place, for example? What were some of the things that were used in the film, object-wise? And then throw it out there as well, right? James, desperate, depressed. Okay. So we have emotions, right? Almost kind of sad, right? Alone, depressed, crowded environment. Okay. I'm writing these down as well, because one of the first things I do when it comes to like any type of film, live stream, short story, anime, doesn't matter. Anything that has a graphic story to it. I always write down the moments that were impressed to me, the stuff that I first think about when I think about it. Like there are things that I just remember about the film that it just come out to me, right? So I'm writing it down. I always like to make some quick notes on a little sticky note, and kind of set it up that way, right? Train station was another one. Okay, so trains, right? Of a phone's bad type film. The guy was really having connection delay on the train, but was more focused on the app. Okay, so like, you know, that whole cellular culture, right, is what we saw there. Okay, so the thing that I'm writing on, if I had to kind of share that with you, is that I'm taking from a sheet here, which is a document in the assignment page called the thumbnail sketch, right? And basically what I do, it doesn't have to be this exact paper, right? But basically, like, I take notes on it, right? I have this field book that I always carry with me. This is really weathered, so it just goes to show how much writing I do. But I always take notes on like just different things, different ideas of concepts and things of that sort. And I just basically like write down those things that come to mind when I just watch films, take graphics, things of that sort. And then sometimes I even do like little rough doodles as well. And this is those field books that you buy for like $5 for $20 on Amazon. But I use this because what I do with this book is that I kind of do what I'm doing here in this thumbnail sketch, which is like I take notes about the film, right? So I'm literally just writing down things that you guys are typing in, like couple, kissing, alone, depressed, crowded, train, cell phones, right? Thumbnailing, right, Sylvia? That's very true. So I'm taking those pieces and putting it into play, right? So I basically turn the thumbnail sketch world. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's graphic designers do this thing called a thumbnail sketch, which is basically little drawings that are the size of your thumb to get ideas across on paper, okay? And so in this instance, I basically do the note part beforehand, okay? So I do that in that frame, okay? So we're just talking about that, right? So that's the first element, okay? So we're just taking notes at this moment. Great, I love the commentary here, okay? Let's kind of switch back a little bit to the next film. Okay, so I'm going to switch to the next film, which is going to be Soar. So let's talk about Soar. Okay, and for Soar, what were some things that you guys remember about Soar? Okay, what is Soar about? What is it that you remember about it? Okay, what are some things that come to mind when you think about this film? Okay, and you can kind of type it in. But what is this film? You know, what do you think this film is about? Right. So when I kind of go back to the film, kind of like any film, I just say to myself, oh, like, you know, what is it? You know, what do I remember from it? And what are some things that I just take away from the film that are most memorable? Okay. You can type that in, right? It doesn't have to be a lot. It could be like just one thing, two things, right? Again, this is a minimalist project. All you need is a graphic or two to tell a whole story, right? As we saw in the examples. So symbolism, style is substance, right? So sometimes the one graphic can tell the whole story. So what are some things that you think kind of like represent this story in pictures? Night full of stars. Okay, so night sky full of stars. So I'll put night/stars. Okay, inspiration to create something, a plane that can fly for a long time. So yeah, so that's kind of like what in a sentence, what does the film mean to you in one, or what is it about in one sentence, right? You know, making things happen, or at least for James, that's what it is, right? I'll write down, you know, make it happen. A plane that can fly for a long time is a representation of making it happen, right? A plane that can fly. So flying plane, I'll write down in my notes here, okay? And again, these are just notes, right? Just quick notes, ideas, themes that just pop up. Places, yeah, pleasant setting. Farmland. So we noticed that, right? Keyword pleasant, right? You know, pleasant could mean a lot of things to a lot of people, right? Pleasant could mean a color. Pleasant could be a shape, a certain type of shape. A pleasant could be a shade. Pleasant could be a thing. It's all contextual to the film, but that's a good like word to kind of describe that film a little bit. Okay, so I wrote that down. Okay, and so if I take a moment to kind of switch that up a little bit, and I'll go back to my camera. So I'm going to stop the share here and then switch over to my notes. I wrote down the same thing, right? I basically took a second here to write down night sky, and let's make sure I don't miss it out. So again, night, stars, make it happen, flying plane, farmland, you know, pleasant. These are just like some keywords I'm noticing there, right? And of course, if we had, you know, more time, then I would write down as many words to describe as possible the film, right? And so that's this particular film, which is for Soar. So that's a quick run through, okay? While I'm on screen here, let's talk about the last one, which is Chicano, okay? Now, so we'll talk about that as the third one, right? Now, Chicano is obviously a documentary. So I use that as a little bit more of a serious tone, okay? And in a way, it's pretty fascinating, right? Like, it's a pretty fascinating film overall. But you know, what are some things that you remember about the film? Like things that stood out to you, graphics, ideas that stood out to you there. Okay. Okay. So we have lowriders, right? So the lowrider is a very iconic symbol of like Southern California culture. You know, some would say it's, you know, Chicano culture, lowrider culture, Cholo culture, you know, sort of like the old school, you know, older generation vehicle. So that's one impression that the film made for you, for Connor. So that's great. Common professional direction of the film. Yeah. So I like that keyword calm and professional, because calm could be the pace, the speed, the images, the colors, the shades, the time, the setting, nighttime, right? The frame rates, right? It's slow. It moves really slow because they're trying to say something about like the emotion behind that moment, right? Professional, high quality, high detail, right? I saw, you know, images in there that were very well lit, good cinematography, right? Lighting, frames, settings. So these are things that kind of stood out. What else about the film do you guys remember that kind of stood out? Sometimes it's not so much pictures, but it could be words. It could be ideas. It could be details as well that stood out to you in the film, that made an impression on you. You might even say that you flash back to a time in your past, and maybe there's a memory that is triggers that you remember from the film, whether it's positive or negative. Maybe it's a song that you hear in your head that you think about when you think about this film, or when you watch the film. So these are some things that are all relevant, and somewhat abstract, but again, in graphic design or in art, in images, abstract is a good thing, right? So abstraction is a level of interest that people want to engage. So that's great. So family, high value on family. Okay. And family can be represented in many different ways graphically as well. So that's a great idea, this idea of like groups and people gathered together. Anything else that stood out to you, or images that you remember from the film, that were like, oh, this is a really interesting graphic, right? Hispanic culture. Okay. So what is it about Latino culture, Hispanic culture? There's a lot of things in and of that by itself, right? So there's some really interesting stuff happening within that. Also, this film is also referring to Japan, right? So even though everything looks Southern California, the context of the film is still very Japanese, right? Like the language is Japanese, right? So that's a big factor as well, right? Like this film is mainly takes place in Japan, right? So there's this really interesting duality of the two worlds. So I wrote a few of those things down in my paper, right? So lowrider, calm, professional, family, Latino culture, Japan, right? These are my notes that I wrote here, right? And the reason I'm going with the list first is because lists are a really great way to kind of create idea maps or trees. I don't know if you guys ever seen that in high school, but basically what there's a little backstory to this, right? Let me kind of switch the camera here, but really quick side story. I had the luck and the fortune of having a artist that lived in like Chatsworth in sort of the valley, who was in the Smithsonian Institute. Okay, so my typography professor back in the the early 2000s said, hey, I have a friend who is a paper sculptor. And I was like, paper sculptor, okay. But he is in the Smithsonian Institute and he has paper sculptures. And I'm like, wow, never heard of anyone that built a sculpture out of paper and is in the Smithsonian. That takes a lot of talent to be in the Smithsonian Institute. The guy comes and his workshop was mostly about color. Okay. And he's like, hey, I'm in the Smithsonian because I basically use color theory and I mix paper sculpture with color theory to create a graphic design, but it's made out of paper. So just take what you have on your computer and I just make it out of paper and I put color to it. That's what I do. And I'm in the Smithsonian because of it. I'm like, rad, dude, that's such a cool approach. I have to find him actually, because I can't remember the name. It's been so many years, but I emailed him and I said, hey, I'm having some issues generating ideas. Like I can't come up with ideas for projects. And so I need help. And the guy's like, come to my house. We'll have lunch and I'll show you my studio. And I'll basically like show you what I do and how I do it. And so he showed me all this stuff, beautiful work. I'm like, this is great, right? The guy's had a studio, used to make, hundreds of thousands of dollars and all this in his studio. And I was like, okay, man, like, how do you get your ideas? Where do ideas come from? And he had the most practical idea, and that most teachers don't tell me, but he did. And I was like, cool, from the horse's mouth, the guy that's done some pretty famous work. And he basically said, I make a list. And then from that list, I make another list. I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, like basically, if I'm doing, let me see if I can show it here. But he basically says that like, I'll make a list and I'll think of everything and anything I could think about related to the topic, right? So if we're talking about, Chicano, then I'm talking about lowriders, calm, professional, family, Latino culture, Japan, and I still keep going. And I'm like, keep going. I'm like, yeah, you just keep going. And it's like, well, what if I can't keep going from here? And he's like, then make a list about Japan. I'm like, oh, what do you mean? So what do you think about when you think about Japan? Well, I think about, the rising sun, right? So I'll just put sun. My pen's not working there. I think about sun. I think about their flag. I think about, music. I think anime. I think about this. So he told me to make sub lists for lists of every word that came from that list. Does that make sense? So the words from the list, he says, now make another list from the words of that list. So if you think about Latino culture, then make a list about things that come to mind when you think about Latino culture. And so I said, oh, okay, well, I think about, LA, I think about music, I think about colors, I think about red, I think about this, right? And now I have, so many more ideas from that list. And if you build more lists from the original list of things that you think about from each of these words from that original list, you have even more ideas. So it's association. It's an idea list, but ideas associated to the main list. Does that make sense? So when you make list out of the list, then you have more ideas. And within the last minute, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 different things for Chicano from one single film. Does that kind of make sense, guys? So all that does is opens up your mind to things related and associations and things of that sort. So just a quick little side note. That's how you can come up with more ideas and create more ideas for your project, okay? Is to make a list out of the list, okay? So here's the next step, and I want to give you guys a little bit of time to kind of sketch away and doodle. But here's the 4 main steps to this project that I'm just going to get real practical about so that you can see it, okay? But the first step in this project is the theme. And we kind of did that together in a way, right? What's the theme of the film? Now, you're going to pick one film to design a poster for, okay? So not one for everyone, just one. So you're going to design a poster for 97% or SOAR or Chicano, but you got to pick one movie, one film to design a poster for in the style of Saul Bass, in a stylist substance format, in a minimalist style, pretty much, okay? And the first step is that what's the theme? What's the movie about? And that's the list, right? We just did that together really quickly as a class, right? We just did this together. Is what's the theme of your film? Okay, SOAR, making it happen, Chicano, Latin culture, Japanese Latin culture, 97%, looking for something, looking for love, right? These are themes. The second step is to visualize the theme. So what are some things related to the theme? So if we're looking for love, what are some symbols, graphics related to this idea of looking for love? So we're going to think about that. We're going to develop that a little bit, right? And brainstorm from that list, right? Step 3, we're going to alter the graphic so that it tracks back to the movie. So that kind of goes back to the Mickey t-shirt. We're going to basically put the story back into the graphic from the film, right? The little details that we noticed in the film. So trains for 97% will come into play. Cell phones as well. For SOAR, it might be a plane or stars, and for Chicano, it might be lowriders or Japanese elements or objects related to Japan, like rising sun or anything related to Japanese culture, right? Followed by the last step, which is adding that font that is an extension or a theme related to the film as well. So if step 1, 2, and 3 are closed, step 4 is the font it's the shoes to the outfit, right? It's the necklace and the jewelry related to your outfit, right? Ladies know about that, right? I need to find the right shoes and the right jewelry to go with the dress. So that's what a font is to me. What's that right shoe or right jewelry to go with the outfit of step 1, 2, and 3. And that's what fonts are to me. They're like accessories that really add to the design. It's the detail that adds to it and communicates it. So, I like my shoes. I like my shoes. So that's the sense. So these are practical steps 1, 2, and 3 that we're going to roll out and do as a class. Okay. So those are the steps. Okay. Now, moving forward, we need ideas, right? We need to pump you guys up with some ideas and just get inspired. Okay. So in Canvas, I actually give you even more ideas for movie posters. Okay. And I'm going to flip it to Canvas right now. And we're going to take a look at that really quick so that we can see it. And it's going to show rough sketches. So let me switch that screen really quick. Here it is. No, not that, but this one. Oops. Okay, let's go back to Canvas, inbox. No, not that one. Let's go back to GDSN. It's going to be under inspiration, under assignments. Okay, and we're going to go down the list here. And under fashion inspired t-shirt design, we're going to need to get inspired, right? We're going to need to get some ideas going for ourselves. So, oops, excuse me. So I have some additional pieces here, but I want the assignment specifically. And here is where we're going to go and find that information. So student view. And right here at the bottom is the inspiration. Okay. For me, I'm going back to those steps. When I do those steps, I'm constantly looking at graphics and thinking about posters and designs that make me think about each step, if that makes sense, right? And if I'm thinking about, 97% and, looking for love, then I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe I should look at some posters and some designs that kind of represent that, right? So here in the pink arrows, I have, the 90-year evolution of movie posters. And then the second link is the minimal movie posters, like, database, I guess you can say, or one of them that's the most popular, right? And I always just like to kind of get a little bit of a visual and just look at like posters in general and just get a feeling. I start looking for graphics that are like inspirational, that are similar to the themes that I'm thinking about in the film. So it is kind of like a process. It's a bit of a journey if you think about it. And I'm just looking at this stuff and I'm saying to myself, you know what? If we're doing a movie poster, then there's going to be maybe some posters out there that are going to be representative of some of the things I want to create, right? And so we have some interesting posters here throughout the 90 years of design or movie poster design, or at least for the first 90, I should say. And as I'm looking at it, I'm just kind of asking myself, what's connecting, what's resonating? Do I want to have characters in the graphic? Am I using a collage? But I always like looking at these posters because they really kind of take it back to the simple times a little bit, keep it real simple. You have a focal point, you have your type, and maybe one or two elements to kind of represent the graphic and the story, right? Granted, Saul Bass did an amazing job, and so Saul Bass is probably the king when it comes to that style as substance era, and he's right here, right? That's why he's not too far in the list there, right? Love in the Afternoon, right? We have the, the black curtain, and, let's pull down the curtains, and, no one sees anything, kind of thing. So there's no famous people, there's no drawing of a famous person in this. All you see is a drawing, a hand, and some type, and you're telling a story. Does that kind of make sense, guys? So, what kind of illustration can we pull from that tells that same story without those graphics, right? And they really knew how to do it back then, right? Ben-Hur, like the font is the focal point. Like that's pretty bold, right? That's pretty cool. Like the font is communicating the whole thing. And granted, Charlton Heston is in this film, right? But he was a superstar back then. No picture of Charlton Heston, right? Just a font, a big, bold font. So today you would probably rarely see that, right? Breakfast at Tiffany's, okay, I get it. We're starting to see a little bit more of that. Famous person, but it's not just Audrey Hepburn sitting there looking all cute, right? There's, she's kind of looking over her shoulder at a couple in the background, right? Maybe looking for love, hint, hint, right? So setting, primary colors, very simple, very minimalist as well, right? Dr. Strangelove. See, I got to give it up to these designers back then, right? Like they were not afraid to take illustration and tell the story, okay? So Saul Bass is famous because he put it into graphics and motion, right? But this started off as sort of posters and graphics. Is this making sense? Is this kind of connecting to you guys a little bit? If it is, a little thumbs up emoji there. So, America today is very star forward, and trying to sell based off of like the brand of the famous person. But back then, these posters were all about, the story, and people cared about what they were going to see. And if the poster told them the story, then that's what they cared about, right? And in many ways, I think as designers, we don't teach that enough anymore. So we really got to get back to that, right? The Italian Job, right? This is storytelling, right? We got a mobster, we got a woman, and there's a map on her bag. So, what's that say? Symbolically that, she knows, she knows the plans, she knows how to get there. She is the key to finding this, to getting this job done. Does that make sense? So, no famous person, but a lot of symbolism going on there, right? In the photography level. This is a good example if I was teaching a Photoshop class, how to put that all into play, right? Catch 22, like medals on a hairy chest, like, hey, like, what does that say? Well, it's a Medal of Honor, dog tags, it's someone that's been through some stuff possibly, but these things have meaning, right? And so what are those graphics? What are those symbols? What are those pictures from these movies, these films that you as the designers are going to translate into pictures? And we got to think about the story and tell ourselves what the story means to me and translate it into a graphic. Does that make sense? So, it takes a little bit of thought, a little bit of processing, a little bit of critical thinking, right? But very effective, right? Jaws, classic, right? This super large shark is the focal point, and it's giant, it's massive, and it's heading towards someone on the surface, right? The big bold red font to symbolize blood, right? And basically this really terrifying image right below, right? So focal point is a shark, right? But there's famous people in this, right? Richard Dreyfuss, right? Robert Shaw, like these are pretty well-known people for the day. So I can go on and on, right? Star Wars, gosh, like what do you say about Star Wars? It's, we got this evil figure in the background, and we have this young person and this female with them, and they're trying to like get this powerful force and take control of it, but someone is following them in the background, right? And there's an army not too far behind that evil black dark figure, right? And so we can say a lot with a little just by using focal point design, the minimum, but the most important pieces of the minimum. Does that make sense? So I feel like I'm going on and repeating myself, but at the end of the day, I think that's like the most important thing I just want to drive home. Okay. So, so professor, okay, show me some projects. What have other students have done? Because, you know, at the end of the day, I don't know how this is going to translate into a design. Okay, let me show you. Okay, show you some student examples of work as well. Okay. All right, Chicano. So this is from spring 2021. So earlier this year. But, you know, this student used rising sun and lowriders as a graphic element to communicate their story, right? You know, they kind of created that effect. They used some Japanese font as well in that style to kind of represent the two cultures, American, Japanese, and they used that graphic, right? They traced the lowrider and pen tool the sun, and added some additional elements to create a sense of motion. But that was their design for their poster starting out to represent that graphic, okay? Jordan did a pretty good job too. Ooh, is it unauthorized? Oh, okay, it's not pulling up. Francesca, she did a really nice job with 97%. She's like, oh, what's going on here? Give me authorization. Oh, leave student view. That's why. In her mind, she's like, trains and love is what I remember, professor. So she's like, I'm gonna put like a train, and I'm gonna put at the, you know, and as the light, it's gonna be like the heart. You know, the train is looking for love, right? So to her, that was a representation of that, right? And I said, okay, cool. Like those are two symbols brought into one to represent searching for love. Okay. Let's take a look. Emily, what did Emily do? I know Emily always brings the heat a little bit. Did sort? Oh no, it's not showing up. I have to bring it out. Oh, okay. It was a little rough and it's not translating here, but she used like the character and the star as an element. So it's a little hard to see and it didn't translate, but to her, she's like, you know what, this whole like reaching for your dreams is kind of like what I remember about the film, professor. So I'm gonna use the star as a symbol of a dream that you're reaching out for. And she used that star from the movie and sort of traced it with the pen tool and sort of carried that over. Okay. So she used that as an example, and then she traced out the title sequence. And the upload is a little different, but I know that the final one definitely came out pretty strong there. Okay. So Jordan, what did Jordan do? Jordan, I remember Jordan really went minimal. So Jordan went with this sort of minimalist poster to represent like the cell phone battery. So he's like, I think about cell phone batteries and like the power, and you know how people freak out when the power is running low, or that, you know, power is a feature. I think about like the battery, but he also, and just like how like the cell phone was a connection to it. But at the same time, like the train was also a factor and kind of making a little bit of a distraction. So he kind of brought those two elements together and said, like, I really think of it as like looking for love with that mobile phone. And to me, that's that representation of a cell phone, right? And he uses colors to kind of express that. So some were a little bit more successful than others. For some students here, so let's take a look. Yvonne did a nice job, I would say. You know, she kind of gave us a literal interpretation of a figure looking for love. So this guy is literally on his phone looking for love, but the woman in red is like flying right by him, right? So he's like missing out. So to her, she thought of that, you know, the distraction of the cell phone, like that cell phone miss, or you're on your phone and you just missed out on somebody, right? He was kind of playing, or she was playing off of that concept. Okay, so there's a few examples here and there, but hopefully this is making sense, yeah, and it's helping you guys get a little bit more of an understanding. If it does, you can give me a little thumbs up emoji, but I just want to make sure that it is kind of making sense. Okay, and last one I'll show you is this graphic that Oscar was working on. And Oscar was saying, like, you know, when I think about like soar, I think about like hands reaching up towards the sky. So he went very abstract, and he kind of went with this sort of graphic symbol of like hands towards the star. And I was like, wow, this is really minimal and abstract, but that's okay, right? Like that's kind of the purpose of the project. It's like telling us the story with minimal graphics. Okay, so these are some nice examples. Okay. Practical next step for next class session next week that you guys will be working on is that you're basically going to download the template, which is the sketch paper for movie concepts for your thumbnails. And you're going to start doing some thumbnails, and you're going to look at some designs, and you're going to try some different ideas by going to the post of the assignment. And you're going to click on to this link, which is the sketch paper for movie concepts. Okay, I always like it when the arrow key doesn't work and I have to draw it, but here we go. You're going to click on the sketch paper for movie concepts. Okay. And basically this is the sheet that you just saw me use, and you can download it. You can draw it on your iPad, your tablet, computer, or good old-fashioned print it out on your printer or friend's printer or school printer or work printer. And we're going to basically start doodling these thumbnail sketches of your movie onto this paper. Okay, so the idea here is that you want to do the uglier the better, as I like to say. And all you really have to do in this format is just think about the graphic that you want to create. And if I switch over my camera, think a little bit about just those elements that you want to use for the film. So if I have my thumbnail sketch here, you're basically asking yourself like, oh, okay, well, you know, if I'm going to do 97%, what am I going to need? Well, the first thing you're definitely going to need is to tell us the name of the film. So it's going to be, you know, 97%, right? It's got to be a nice focal point. Movies need to have that focal point for the film. And you're going to try to translate some of your notes. So looking for love, what does that mean? You know, is it a heart that's happening here? Is it a broken heart that's going on there? And there's like, you know, this strange dark background over that heart. And you have your movie posters there, or your type, and there's like a dark background, right? Very simple, very rough, nothing perfect. The uglier, the better, because we want to do just more like doodles, if anything. Okay. So I always like to kind of write in my titles and use like simple images. If it's 97%, SOAR, then you're going to ask yourself, all right, well, you know, SOAR is going to be the film that I'm going to use for this project, making it happen, flying plane. I don't know, it could be that star that we had spoken about, and maybe it's going to be like a shooting star or a plane that is kind of like heading towards, you know, that object, right? And again, you know, uglier the better, nothing too crazy, nothing too detailed. But you know, what would that look like if you're soaring towards your dreams and it's a plane or it's a star as like the focal point? But you're basically going to do like multiple versions of the same film on each of these squares. Okay, is that kind of making sense overall? So we just want to get some rough doodles. Okay, ideas matter. It's not about the quality, it's about the quantity. So the more ideas, the more of these sheets that you can kind of create ideas from, the better. And they're meant to be ugly, okay? So I give you permission to make these look terrible, okay? They do not have to be perfect, okay? if you're a pro, go for it, right? But this stuff is supposed to be rough. This stuff is supposed to be, doodles, right? This stuff is supposed to just give me a rough idea of where things are gonna go and what is your concept that you're trying to build on, where's the lowrider gonna go, everything like that, right? That, there's the rising sun professor, right? And just, it may or may not look like that, but I'm just giving you a ballpark of placement and scale and type, and that's it. Okay, so that's the idea. Okay, come ready with this for next Tuesday. Okay, try to get a page. Okay, just 8 ideas is fine. All right, and then when we connect, we're basically going to have you turn on the camera and share some of your concepts. Okay, so I might have you guys turn on your camera and just basically literally say, here it is right here. Or you can photograph it and upload it to a form, and then we can kind of take a look at it via the form as well. But we want to get practical. We want to think about it. Okay. The lecture is also on the assignment. So I show you the steps, but I would definitely take it back to what we were saying, which is pick one film and ask yourself, what is this movie about to me? And write down those thoughts about what it means to you and see if you can create a graphic that represents what it means to you in that square. Okay, rough drafting. Exactly, James. So that's the idea. Okay, so I just wanted to get that out there. I wanted to break that down, but we're going to thumbnail this up. If you run out of ideas, go back to Canvas and look at the concepts on those 2 links on the inspiration. Have 90 years of posters, and the minimalist poster has like dozens of ideas as well that we can pull from and get inspiration with, and you can kind of incorporate that into your thumbnail sketches here. Okay, so that's the first step. If you want to know what happens after this step, basically what we're going to do is that we're going to find graphics, and we're going to pen tool and also show you how the computer live traces graphics. So we're going to use the help of the computer to draw your graphic. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys what image tracing does, and you're going to get mad at me because you're going to say, oh, I thought the computer couldn't draw. Actually it does, but it's not as good. So you'll see next week what I mean by that, but we're going to use the power of the computer to help us draw these graphics, and we'll use our drawing skills as well to bring the 2 worlds a little bit together. And that's how we're going to get this done fast. So we're going to use the computer's power to get the project done sooner than the Mickey project. Does that make sense? So that's how we're going to pull it off in literally like a week's time, give or take. All right. Okay. If there's any questions, stick around. Okay. But that basically is going to conclude it for tonight. So rough draft, get some sketches ready for tonight. If you have to go back to the films, watch them twice, 3 times, 4 times, watch them over and over again, and just see if you catch something graphically that you think you can bring into the design of your rough thumbnail sketch. Okay. So that's helped me a lot. I just rewatch things and I catch them again and notice things I never noticed before the last time. And then I just kind of start sketching again and bringing that into my world a little bit. Okay. All right. All right, guys, I'm excited to see what we got for next week. And again, if you have your t-shirts, then stick around. We'll get to talk a little bit as well for tonight. I'm going to dismiss you guys a few minutes early, and we will see you next Tuesday. Okay. Be safe, and we'll see you next time. All right.